Good afternoon, everybody. We'd like to welcome you to another entry in our NPR Chamber educational series. This one's called Make Your Content Findable with OnPage SEO. We'll introduce our host in just a minute. My name is Joel Berrocal. I'm the National Director of Small Business Development with the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce. So typically what we like to do is provide these type of these free educational webinars for on various topics and covering various levels of stuff, beginner things into deeper dives. So it's just something we want to keep doing. We plan on putting this type of content out consistently. So if you want to know more, you could go to nprchamber.org. I'll leave the website in the chat. So you can just stay up to date with everything we have going on. And then we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll introduce, I'll let our host take it from here and kind of let him run the show. We'll save the Q&A for the end of the presentation. So you can go to the Q&A section, ask a question, and we'll make sure that it gets answered before the end of the presentation. So floor is yours, my man.
Thank you, Joel, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us here in this, I would say, second webinar about SEO. This one is titled Make Your Content Findable with OnPage SEO. Basically, we're going to be going over a couple of things regarding the different factors of SEO, particularly on-page SEO. There's currently 4 factors of SEO that people need to take, be mindful of, and this is one of the most important ones, and it's considered to be one of the easiest ones, since on-page SEO is basically everything that is on, like the word itself says, on page. It's everything that you have control of on your page, on your website. So before I dive in, I want to thank the National Puerto Rican Chamber of Commerce and Joel for reaching out and obviously allowing me to present to you guys about this interesting topic. So let's get started. So on the agenda today, we have a couple of things. It's just 4 sections in total. First one, we're going to be talking about the basics of on-page SEO. Then we're going to go over how to write SEO-friendly content. Next, we're going to talk about metrics to monitor. And finally, we're going to have a slide about tools that will help you with your on-page SEO efforts. And then obviously, as Joel mentioned, we're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, please feel free to write them down in the chat below or in the chat window, wherever you have it on your screen. And I'll be sure to answer those as quickly as I can after the presentation. So first things first, a little bit about me. That's me. I'm Puerto Rican, born and raised, went to the States to Syracuse University to get my college degree in international relations, which has nothing to do with SEO. But the research aspect of the degree itself is what made me fall in love with SEO, since it involves a lot of research. Went back to Puerto Rico after graduating in 2018 and started working with a media company called Ad Practitioners, where they own several digital properties such as consumersadvocate.org, which is a review website. And then I don't know if some of you are familiar with, but we also currently acquired money.com, or Money Magazine as it was previously known. So that's a little bit of me. And now we can dive into the nitty-gritty of on-page SEO. First question. You're probably wondering, what is on-page SEO, right? I don't know if you're part of the digital world, digital marketing world, or if you own a business, or you're just, you follow a couple of marketers on social media or whichever digital platform you like to get informed about marketing and digital marketing. You probably heard about SEO, right? But have you heard about on-page SEO? I'm sure you have, but here's a little bit of the definition of what it is. On-page SEO, also known as on-site SEO, is the practice of optimizing web page content for search engines and users, emphasis on users. Common on-page SEO practices include optimizing title tags, content, internal links, and URLs. We're going to be covering all of that in our on-page SEO basics. And this was a quote that was taken directly from Brian Dean. His website is backlinko.com. He is one of the leading experts, or, I would, in my opinion, say the leading expert in SEO. He has some great content, so I definitely urge you guys to check him out whenever you can. I have the source on the bottom of the screen below, but I'll also be sharing this presentation with NPR to, they can post it on their website. So that's pretty much the gist of what is on-page SEO. Now let's go and talk about why is it important? Why should I pay attention to SEO, right? SEO seems to be, I don't know, a buzzword, if you will. I wouldn't consider it a buzzword, but it's been gaining a lot of traction recently. Ever since obviously the pandemic hit, people have been spending a lot of time at their homes. They've been building businesses, mostly digital businesses, right, to avoid that close encounter with another person, social distancing, right? So why is it important? Why is on-page SEO important? I'll give you a quick definition. The most basic signal that information is relevant is when a web page contains the same keywords as your search query. If those keywords appear on the page, or if they appear in the headings or body of the text, the information is more likely to be relevant. And guess who said this? Google themselves. So this was taken directly from Google's search page. I'll also be linking to all these sources in the final slide of this presentation, but also it'll be in each slide at the bottom. But basically what Google is saying here, pay attention to keywords, right? If a keyword or basically anything that you input in a search bar on Google or any search engine, Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo, etc., that's classified as a keyword. And if you were present at my leveraging your website with SEO presentation, I basically went over each element of the SEO industry in general. So I urge you to go to the NPR's Chamber website and check it out if you haven't done so. But basically what Google is saying here, pay attention to the keywords that you are going to be using for your content. And I'll go over a little bit more on this further down the presentation. So factors of on-page SEO. What are the factors of on-page SEO? Or there's a couple of them. We got search intent, we got header tags, metadata, image optimization, keyword optimization, remember, internal linking, and finally URL structure. So these are not in any order specifically, but we'll be covering each and every one of these throughout the presentation. But keep in mind that I would personally consider the most important ones to be search intent, header tags, and keyword optimization. I'll tell you why later on. Number one, what is search intent, right? Well, it's pretty simple, but it's sometimes hard to understand. But basically, search intent is the why behind the search query, right? Everybody has a reason for why they go to a search engine. In this case, let's continue with the example of Google. Why they go to Google to search for something, right? Let's say you're looking for how to make a cake, right? There's a search intent, there's a why behind it. You want to learn something, how to make a cake, or you just go, MacBook Pro price, for example. You're looking for a specific type of product and your intent is very specific because you're looking for a price. I'll get more into that in the next slide. But basically, this is the gist of what is the understanding of search intent. If you build your content based on this understanding of search intent, and I'll just keep repeating it, right? Because that's how it sinks into people's minds, and that's how I got it done for when I was learning SEO. Basically, you have to understand what is the search intent that you're writing for, that you're creating the content for. What would be the content that your audience or your target audience wants to find that you can give it to them? So what does that mean? That might sound a bit confusing, right? But there's 4 types of search intent, and I'll cover each and every one of these in this slide, and I'll also give an example like I just did in the previous slide. Number 1 is informational, right? And this is what the word itself says, right? Is when the searcher is looking for information, but not all information is formulated as a question, right? So the example here is, what is SEO? That's informational. You're looking to be informed on what is SEO, right? Another example could be Donald Trump, right? It's not a question, but you're basically looking for information about the, in this case, keyword Donald Trump. Although everybody knows who he is, but still it's considered to be an informational type of search intent. Next, we have navigational. It's when the searcher is looking for a specific website. Think of it as Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, etc. Well, people usually just type it in the search bar up top of their browser, right? Whether it's Safari, Chrome, etc. But most people also tend to write it in the search box on google.com. So I give the example of Facebook, right? It's basically the same thing, but when you search on this, when you do the search on the search box in google.com, that's what gets registered in Google's database and index that is informing the search engine itself that you're looking for, in this case, Facebook, which is navigational. You're looking to arrive at a destination, in this case, again, Facebook. The third one is transactional. Transactional is the previous example I gave in the factors of on-page SEO, MacBook price, right? You're looking to make a transaction. It's when the searcher is looking to make a purchase. They most likely know what they want to buy. Obviously, you're looking for pricing. You already have the brand. You already have the product or service you're trying to purchase. All you need is the price, right? The main keyword here is the price. And the secondary keyword here is the product or service, which in this case is the MacBook. And then the final search intent is commercial. And I know you can probably get confused as to, okay, transactional and commercial, they sound the same. And in a way they are, but they do have some differences, which I'm going to highlight in the example. Pizza near me. So it's not the same as transactional to write pizza near me, because you're still looking for, in this case, a pizza shop near you. There could be dozens of pizza shops near where you are, right? Because it's based on geolocation if you're using Google Maps. So you don't specifically know what you're looking for yet, but you do know the product that you want, right? You just don't know who you're going to buy it from. So that's why it's commercial. If you were to look for, in this example, Domino's pizza near me, then that's a transactional type of search intent, because you already know the company that you're looking for and the product and service that you want to purchase from that particular company. Hopefully that's that was easy to understand, but we'll just keep it going. And then if you have any questions, just make sure to write them in the Q&A window. Next, we're going to be talking about heading tags, and these are labeled as heading 1 to heading 6. So what does this mean? Headings are basically, as I'm sure you've all visited any web page or a blog at least, the heading tags are what tells Google what the page is about. What is the content about? What is the context? What is the structure of the particular page? The most important one, you guessed it, the H1 or the heading 1. This basically is the title or the name of your page or post, which it turns out to be the biggest text that you'll probably see on a page. And then if we keep going down, as you can see in the slide, it just keeps getting smaller and smaller and smaller, right? So that means that it goes from most important to least important. I'll give an example in this same slide. So we'll just keep with the on-page SEO topic as an example. So an H1 for a page you might land on could be learning on-page SEO. So that's the title of the page. So once you write that, Google is going to know, okay, this page is about this topic, on-page SEO. And what's the type of content? Well, they're going to be learning about SEO, on-page SEO, right? But then you're wondering, well, Google is not smart enough to know everything there is about learning on-page SEO, right? And that's why you have the following heading tags, which in this case, the second one would be, what is on-page SEO? So think of it of heading tags as the order of how the content is structured. So what is on-page SEO would be considered somewhat of a subsection or a section, if you want to, depends on how you want to structure it, of learning on-page SEO. But the first thing you ask, as I already answered in the previous slides, what is on-page SEO, right? And then an H3 could be a subsection of what is on-page SEO, which we already covered, factors of on-page SEO. And then another subsection could be search intent, right? Search intent is a factor of SEO, of on-page SEO. But what is search intent? Are there any types of search intent? Yes, that could be a heading 5 or an H5. And then what are the types of search intent, right? Well, informational, transactional, etc. However, I'll still give you a little bit of tips as to which ones should you not try to write about so often. So in this case, most people stick to writing H2s and H3s. It's rare to see the use of H4s and below. The reason being is that, like I just mentioned here, it's too deep of a coverage, right, for a particular topic. It's not bad if you do so, but still, even if you're considering of writing, for example, learning on-page SEO as a topic on your website, then think of it how you're going to structure it. You don't have to actually follow this particular guideline. It's just sort of how to get you to understand the importance and how the heading tags work for SEO. But you can easily just keep what is on-page SEO as an H2, and then factors of on-page SEO as an H3, search intent H3, types of search intent that could be an H4, and then informational. It doesn't have to be a heading tag; it can just be plain text. Google usually doesn't pay that much attention to anything below H4, but if the topic, as I said, if the topic is deep enough that it merits that Google has to know about the rest of the heading tags below H4, then they'll do so because Google is smart enough to do that. Next slide, we have the metadata. What is metadata? It's an HTML or hypertext markup language, if you're familiar with coding, attribute that provides a brief summary of a web page. What does that mean, and who said this? Well, this came directly from Moz. Moz is basically a SEO tool, is very well known in the industry. It's probably one of the leading tools of SEO. And it's also one of the tools I also recommend that people who are trying to get into SEO or want to learn about SEO can visit their site, moz.com. Obviously, every tool I mention here, I want to put a disclaimer, is non-sponsored, so just giving the heads up right there. But basically, this is the description of what a metadata is. It's an HTML attribute that provides a brief summary of a web page. So when you say brief, you have to be as concise as possible, but still informative, right? You don't want to leave any important details out of your metadata. But what is the metadata? How do I find it? Where can I see it? We'll use the example as we did before, learning on-page SEO. When you go into Google and you type learning on-page SEO in the search bar and you go and search, you'll probably get a few examples, right? Or results in this case. What you see in the search results page or the SERPs is this, right? You see a result that is clickable, that has a URL in it. That is the meta title. So basically, the meta title is usually the same as your H1 tag, but you'll see that most websites have the website or domain name right next to the title. Why? Well, you wouldn't want to click on a result that you didn't know where it was coming from, right? Although, if you see right here above, you can still see the website and also the path of where this content is stored. But still, most people, in my personal opinion, I don't think they'll pay attention to these small characters on a page, especially if they're on a mobile device, which is even smaller. So what people usually do is they just include the domain name just because it's easier to identify where the content is coming from. But basically, this is the meta title. And the meta title is recommended. I think so Google changes the character limit that you can have on the meta title before it starts to cut off the meta title. But basically, what's best practice for a meta title is to include your primary keyword. In this case, as you can see, I put on learning on-page SEO. They have on-page SEO ranking factors, right? They have the main keyword on-page SEO. And you can also see that in the meta description, which is the text that is below the meta title, is a description, as the word itself says, right? But one thing to keep in mind here is that it also has a character limit, as you can see here in the second example, which I highlighted. If you compare it to the first example, the first result, you'll see that you can read the entire meta description, right? So they kept it inside the parameters of what it is to of a meta description, right? To have a meta description that could describe what that particular page is about. And it's extremely important to always have a meta description. Number one, because it helps people understand what your page is about. Number two, it also helps with click-through rate, which we're going to talk a little bit more down the road. But basically, the click-through rate is what tells Google that a particular page is actually worth showing in the search results, right? If people are seeing, in this example, moz.com on-page SEO ranking factors, and people are clicking on that particular page, Google starts to say, hey, people are searching for this particular topic, learning on-page SEO, and they click on this result. So this must be very important. This must be relatable. This must match the query that people are looking for, right? So they usually bump it up in the search results, which could be considered a ranking factor. Now, remember, Google doesn't explicitly mention what are the ranking factors. There's over hundreds of ranking factors, but SEO professionals and other digital marketing experts in the industry have done A/B testing and experiments throughout the years to actually have factual data that backs up what they say could be considered a ranking factor. So just keep that in mind. But bottom line here is always, always, always have a meta title and a meta description. And always remember to include, if possible, and if it makes sense, the main keyword that you're trying to rank for in both of these metadata attributes. If you also notice in the meta description, you have some bolded text, right? It's scattered a little bit in these two examples, but the words that are being highlighted are words that you looked for. So Google is trying to pair up the type of keywords that you're searching for with the results that you're going to get. So for Moz, you have on-page ranking factors. So page is bolded. Not sure why on is not, but it's Google, right? Then you have learning. You search for learning. You have SEO. You have page again. You have here learning search engine optimization. And this is another cool thing. Even though you did not write on search engine optimization and you did not include, learning search engine optimization, Google still understood the type of search that you're trying to do. So they try to, like I said, they try to give you the most relevant result that they can find in their database and then shows it to the searcher, right? In this case, learning search engine optimization. If you're someone looking for this particular topic, then you're gonna, be attracted by either of these two results because it's exactly, or in a way, what you're looking for. Next, we're gonna talk about URL structure, or as I like to mention, URL slug. So basically the slug, and I know it's a weird term, even I find it weird, slug, right? But still, the slug is anything that is after the folder. I don't know if you guys can see the cursor on the screen, but if you see in the first example where I have a big X, johncarlosmerced.com/blog/numbers and letters, that numbers and letters part of the URL is what's considered a slug. So it's always important that you optimize the URL slug. Why? Well, basically, the URL slug is also considered to be a ranking factor based on data. And also it helps the reader or the person that's searching for a particular topic understand what the page is about. And it also gives a bit of more page that has clear topic description, right? In this case, in the second one, learn on-page SEO. So just keep that in mind. If you're optimizing for your URL slug, remember to keep it short, right? You're not, imagine if this was learn on-page search engine optimization and goes all the way down the search bar. That's a little bit too long, right? It's right, but it's long. So you're better off trying to find a way to keep it informative and concise, but still short as much as possible. So learn on-page SEO works way better. And also remember to include the main keyword. So in every single of these on-page SEO factors, it's important that you keep in mind to include your main keyword, so that not just Google understands the keyword that you're trying to rank for, but also the searcher understands that the result that is being given to them is relevant to what they're searching for. Next, we're going to be talking about internal links. Internal links are defined again by my good friend, Brian Dean. He's not my friend. I wish he was, but either way, he defines it as hyperlinks that point to pages on the same domain. Domain is a website. Internal links is extremely important, right? Because, let's give you an example. Each page, each, post, article, etc., that you access on the internet has its own ranking. It's called PageRank by Google, and this is official by Google. They have announced it themselves. It's called PageRank. So what PageRank means is if the content is considered to be high quality, informative, it's well structured, meaning it has good user experience, right? That means that it's pleasant for whoever's reading or accessing that page. It keeps them there, right? The content itself, the way the page is structured, the heading tags are well organized, the colors, everything that you can think of that can make a user experience pleasant will make people stay. So that's all taken into account when you visit a web page, right? And internal links is another part of that process, right? So I'm sure you've read an article, either a news article or whatever, and you've seen hyperlinks, right? Or basically words that have either an underline and have this different color than the rest of the text, right? And if you move your mouse over that text, which is called anchor text, you'll see that you can be taken to another page, whether it is within the same page, the same website, excuse me, or an external website. In this case, we're talking about internal, right? So each of these individual pages gets a score. Again, PageRank, or in the SEO world, link juice. And an important part that needs to be grasped is that if you have 3 pages, let's say, about the same type of topic, but one of those 3 pages is the main page, which has the most in-depth comprehensive content about that particular topic, that one has the most authority, that one has the most link juice. How do you distribute that link juice, that authority throughout your website? Well, it's recommended that you link, as it says in the image here, link to important pages. So you link to another page that is relevant to the main page that you're linking from. I hope that wasn't confusing. But basically, you have to link in between your pages on your website so that the authority of the page that has the most page rank can be distributed. Now, I don't recommend, putting 10 internal links to 10 different pages on your website, or going overboard, right? Going crazy about, I need to link to this particular page, just, to bump it up, to give it more authority, more ranking. It doesn't work that way. I recommend, and it's the best practice to do so, to link out to pages that are relevant. So if you're on a page about learning on-page SEO, you probably don't want to hyperlink internally to a page that is about email marketing, right? Email marketing and SEO, sometimes they can go hand in hand, depends on how you approach it, but it's usually not relevant. So Google is going to see that internal link and they're going to go, but it doesn't make any sense. What does email marketing have to do with learning on-page SEO? So they usually just they can either decide to pass that authority to that email marketing page or not. It's up to Google. So if you were to link to, learning SEO in general, well, there you go. Now that makes sense, right? You're linking to a relevant, topical relevant page within your website. So just keep that in mind. Next, we're going to be talking about image optimization. Now, before I dive into this slide, this is very important. Images are everywhere. Images give more context, right? Images are easier to understand. This could be in the form of a chart, right? This could be in the form of an infographic, a graphic itself, right? That you created on InDesign or Photoshop, etc., whichever program you use. But basically, images are essential for understanding content and context for particular contents, right? So it's extremely important that you pay attention to this because, number one, images are heavy, right? If you have a high quality image, it's a heavy file when you try to download it on your computer. So imagine how heavier it must be when you download it, or when you upload it in this case, to a web page. That storage, right, that particular image has, passes on to your web page, and that usually takes time for your website itself to download to the user. So how do you optimize for an image? Images are one of the leading causes of slowdown on websites because they're badly optimized, or they're not at all. Most people just upload them and they just forget it. So things that you have to keep in mind for image optimization, obviously, is speed. This can be, the weight of the image, like I mentioned earlier. So you can probably download like a plugin, or, look for a website that is, image compression without losing quality, because that's usually another mistake. Don't compress it too much, or else you'll lose the quality. And if you have if it's a blown up image that takes half of your screen and you compress it to reduce the file size of the image, you'll probably lose quality, which can affect how people see it when they visit that particular web page. So just keep that in mind, either a plugin or a web page that reduces the file size, but not the image quality per se. Another thing to keep in mind is to use the proper image format. So the most popular image formats for websites are PNGs or JPEGs, right? PNGs are for higher quality images, whereas JPEGs are more lower quality, but they usually tend to overlap, right, with each other. Now we've seen other types of formats like GIFs. There's a new one called WebP, which caters more to web pages, but it's not applicable to every web page. You have to pay attention to how your website is set up, how's the coding. So it's not as simple as some people might make it seem. It's something that is sadly very tedious that you have to pay attention to, because you have to do this process for every single image that you're trying to upload to your website, if at all. Next, we have the alt text or alternative text. So this is basically a text that describes the image. So the purpose of this is to improve accessibility for people who can't see images on web pages, which includes users who use screen readers and or have lower bandwidth connections. What does this mean? When you have a low bandwidth or slow, slow website speed, it means that your image won't download until obviously your speed gets faster, or whatever the reason might be. You'll probably not see the full image itself. You'll probably just see a text. So that text that you see, if your image doesn't download, that's called the alternative text. As you can see in the image here, you have an image name, right? And then you have the alt text. So the alt text, you have to be descriptive, although again, concise. If possible, you have to include your keyword, right? If it's applicable. In this example, you'll see it's an app on iPhone XS, iOS 5.8. That's In my opinion, that's a bit too long. But also it's not representative of what's in the image. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind. So in the image that you see here in the bottom, I'd probably just put Apple iPhone XS, or just Apple iPhone. Number one, we don't know what the model is. Number two, we don't know what the operating system is. We don't know how many space it has. Like it says 64 gigabytes, space gray. We don't know the color, although if that's the color, then I guess space gray could be added. But you're gonna have to try and be as precise as possible and try to avoid over detailing the alt text, right? So something to keep in mind as well. And then finally, another important aspect of image optimization is image title, as you can see here, or image name, captions, file names, and the text itself. The title is self-explanatory. It's recommended also it's because in the back end, when you're trying to upload, it's easier to find an organization. The image title is also considered by Google, right? Google extracts information about the subject matter of the image from the content of the page. So this includes captions, image titles. So wherever possible, make sure your images are placed near relevant text and on pages that are relevant to the image subject matter. So you wouldn't add this iPhone XS image to, I don't know, an SEO learning SEO post, for example, unless obviously you're using it to give an example of alternative text. That makes sense. But if you're just using it to, hey, here's an iPhone, that doesn't make any sense, right? So be sure to always keep in mind relevancy. Relevancy is extremely important in SEO, and it's something that I keep hammering down, because if something is not relevant and doesn't make sense to go together, it's not worth doing it. Just scratch it and start from zero again, but don't force something if you don't see the relevancy of it, right? And this is an image example, right? So you see a file name, OnPage SEO chart, file type, it's an image / PNG. You got the dimensions as well, which is something you have to keep in mind also when you're uploading an image. And you got the alternative text, which I already gave an example for. So now we're done with the SEO on-page SEO basics. And I know that's a lot of information, and you'll have a copy of this presentation, but I understand it's a lot of information for, we've gone over 40 minutes now of presentation. So please just bear with me. And again, if you have any questions, please make sure to write them down in the Q&A window. Now that you have this entire bucket of knowledge about on-page SEO, you're probably wondering, all right, it's cool. I know all this information, but how do I actually implement this, right? How do I write SEO-friendly content? Well, I label it in 7 steps, although it can be enlarged a bit more, but just for in terms of time constraints, I'm just going to keep it at 7. So number 1 would be step 1, write content that your target audience is looking for, aka keyword research. So anytime that you're thinking of a topic that you want to write about, you have to do keyword research. You have to know what people are searching for relevant to that particular topic. And you can do this, you can use Google themselves. You can use Wikipedia is also a good example. You can use YouTube as well. You can use a plethora of resources online that can give you an idea of what people are searching for a particular topic. Next, we have matching search intent. So that I put it as number 2 because after you, or you can combine it with step 1, right? You can do both at the same time. Because when you're looking for keywords, like I said, if you want to look for MacBook price versus pizza near me, one is transactional, one is commercial. So the intent is different. So it's definitely, and the keywords are obviously important keywords, right? If you want to use either of those keywords, you have to keep in mind which one has the particular search intent. So that takes me to number 3. You have to write comprehensive content if necessary. So it's usually recommended to write long form content when you're trying to create anything on a web page, right? If you're writing a blog, if you're writing an article, Get into as much detail as you can, be comprehensive, and again, be concise and be informative. Still, you'll notice that when you do the research, right, the keyword research, you'll notice that probably your competitors are writing long-form content, comprehensive, in-depth content. So that means you don't necessarily have to copy them, but it's a guide that you can keep in the back of your mind when you're writing, right? If you're writing about MacBook Pros, you're probably going to compete with Apple. It's not the best choice. But if you're going to do a MacBook review, right? Let's say if you're going to be doing a geolocation review, let's say MacBook prices in Puerto Rico, for example, that's more specific, right? That's something that you can compete for compared to MacBook with Apple, right? That doesn't make any sense. So you don't have to write as much if you were to do MacBook prices in Puerto Rico compared to MacBook just as it is, right? MacBook is just the keyword versus the long tail keyword, MacBook prices in Puerto Rico. And then number 4, use relevant keywords throughout your content. So that's another thing that confuses a lot of people. When you're writing SEO content, you're probably wondering, well, there's a thing called keyword stuffing, which basically means that you, in an unnatural way, you keep implementing your main keywords throughout your content, even though they don't make sense. People could identify immediately that these words are being forced in the content. So Google is smart enough to know that, and they actually did an update to catch websites that were doing that, and they either penalized them, suspended them, or downgraded them in rankings. So don't do that. Make sure to write the relevant keywords when it makes sense, not just for the sake of including it because your competitor wrote the main keyword, X amount of times. It doesn't work that way. Number 5 is to optimize for both meta title and meta description. Again, when I say optimize, I mean include the main keyword, provide context, and also make sure that you're descriptive in your meta description. One caveat of the meta description and recently with the meta title is that Google decides what they want to add to both of these metadata attributes, right? What that means is if you write both a meta title and a meta description for your website on your backend, Google can decide whatever they want to show in the search results. I know it's frustrating to know that because basically you can put all this work into deciding what is the best text to add to both of these attributes. But in the end, Google decides, okay, no, I don't like that. I'm going to use this regardless. But even still, you can still pivot. And if Google is pulling, let's say, your subtitles or a heading tag into the meta description, then that gives you a signal that, hey, this is the type of content that Google actually prefers. So let me optimize my either meta title or meta description to match, not word for word, but similarly match what Google is trying to portray in the search results. Number 6 would be don't forget about internal links. So you'll probably notice that this is somewhat of a review of all the on-page SEO basics, but this is more of a step-by-step guideline as to things that you have to keep in mind when you're writing your content. So in this case, don't forget internal links. Like I said, internal links pass on what we call link juice or authority or page authority to other pages within your own website if they're relevant enough and if they actually have merit to do so. And then finally, use multimedia, but remember to optimize. Again, images, videos, GIFs, anything that you can think of that could keep your reader engaged in your content. Now, you have all this information, you write your content, and you're thinking, well, how do I measure this? How do I know my page is successful? How do I know my content is doing great? How do I know it's not doing great? What do I need to fix, right? Because you don't want to go into every single step again and try to find out what's going on, right? So I created this helpful infographic of the top 5 metrics that you need to pay attention to. And you can usually access this through either an SEO tool or a Google tool, which could be either Google Analytics or Google Search Console. So again, I 100% recommend that you visit the learning about SEO or leveraging your website with SEO presentation that I initially gave out a few months ago on the NPR website. But basically, the top 5 metrics that you have to take care of or you have to watch out for is bounce rate, which is the percentage of a single page session. So anytime you access a page, that's a session in which there was no interaction with the page. They didn't scroll, they didn't click on anything. They just basically entered the page and immediately got out. So it has a duration of 0 seconds. So that's how quickly someone can decide whether your content is worth engaging with or not. And this also takes into consideration page speed, right? If your page takes usually longer than 3 seconds to load, most people will exit and your bounce rate goes up. So you're going to try and keep your bounce rate as slow as possible because that means people are staying longer on your site. Number 2 would be backlinks. Backlinks are basically links that are pointing from external websites to your website. So if Giancarlos Merced is writing about SEO, and I get a backlink, from Brian Dean from Backlinko, that's a good sign, right? Because Brian Dean's website, Backlinko, is very authoritative and is known as a leading expert in the SEO industry. So when I have a backlink from a website like Backlinko, it's going to tell Google, hey, Backlinko is linking to giancarlosmerced.com. That must be a good sign. giancarlosmerced.com must be a good website because a high authority website is linking to giancarlosmerced.com. Now, I know this can be confusing. And again, I urge you to visit my leveraging your website with SEO presentation. Again, we go back to the click-through rate. So the click-through rate is a ratio showing how often people see your ad, or in this case, a free organic product or listing, and end up clicking on it. The click-through rate can be used to gauge how well your keywords and ads and free listings are performing. Again, what helps your click-through rate in most cases is your meta title and your meta description. Your meta title tells your reader what the page is about, and the description tells the reader what the content will be about. And when you click on it, it tells Google that this result is actually relevant to what people are searching for. Organic traffic, this can be searched for in either Google Search Console or Google Analytics, but it's basically traffic that arrives at your site through a search engine result, Google, Yahoo, Bing. And then finally, average time on a page, or page session time, however you want to remember it by. But it's basically the average amount of time users spent viewing a specific page or screen, a set of pages or screens. It can be more than one, right? And this is what you want to aim for. You want to find either an average or just regular time on page, right? Because the more time on page you have, the less your bounce rate will be. When you have more on-page time, it means that people are clicking through your page, which your click-through rate goes up. And if your click-through rate goes up, your organic page traffic goes up, right? And if you keep getting these metrics all together, you can eventually get backlinks, which means that people trust in your content enough to want to link to you or refer to you as a source or as an expert source for a particular topic. And every single of these metrics is a good signal to Google. Now, we're almost at the end, so stay with me. But basically, these are, in my opinion, the 3 most important SEO tools for on-page SEO that you can find. Ahrefs is an SEO tool that is somewhat of a competitor to Moz. But the cool thing about Ahrefs, I use it every day, is that they have a 7-day trial for $7. So you basically have access to the entire database of this tool for 7 days and $7. $7 is, come on, it's nothing. Basically, you can spend $7. Or you can download their Chrome extension, which also helps to find details about on-page SEO for particular pages. Same thing with Moz. Moz is also a paid tool, but I like it a bit better than Ahrefs in regards to their Chrome extension, because their Chrome extension gives you information that Ahrefs probably wouldn't give you for free. And then finally, SEO Minion. SEO Minion is an all-around SEO tool specifically for on-page. So basically, when you visit a page and you activate the SEO Minion Chrome extension, you have the ability to analyze on-page SEO, highlight the links, check for broken links. You have a review in the search engine results page, so you can basically look at your metadata and your meta description and your meta title. So it's all these plethora of tools at your disposal for free. Specifically SEO Minion is free, that you can have and use when you're creating content or actually using it to monitor your own content. So, do we have any questions? We went 50 minutes or so, right? But again, I know it's a lot. If you have any questions that, if you're still processing the entire thing, please feel free to, reach out to either me or Joel, and, asking about particular areas of the presentation, or, I'm more than happy to help however I can.
I have a question, and thank you again. I always enjoy these. I'm fascinated with SEO. It's so above my head. I get so much out of these. One question, I guess it's more of a basic question. I know most people, the vast majority of people use Google as their search engine, but I imagine these techniques and everything you taught are pretty uniform among the various other search engines, Bing and the like.
Can you repeat that? You were cut off a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, I was saying that I know the vast majority of people use Google as their search engine, but I'm assuming these techniques and the stuff you've been showing us are like pretty uniform among other search engines like Bing and those other ones. It's all kind of the similar, right? I imagine.
Yes, that is correct. You can use all these for other search engines as well, right? But obviously, we all know that Google has the biggest market share when it comes to these other search engines. But still, don't sleep on these other search engines, right? This is another thing I like to remind people of. I can give an example of a project or a web page that I own. The majority of my traffic comes through Google, but I'd say about a fourth of my traffic comes from other search engines: Yahoo, Bing, DuckDuckGo. And I'm not even optimizing for those web pages, for those search engines, which I could do so, but each search engine has their own quote unquote SEO rules, if you will. But yes, overall, the fundamentals is basically the same.
Pretty uniform. Okay. Another question I have regarding the URL slugs. Is that something you would change within, I guess, like whoever's hosting your website, or do you have to go to like a third party website, like to put the URL in to be able to change it and customize it? How does that work exactly?
So it's tricky, right? Number one, when you already set up a URL slug, it's recommended and fully emphasized not to change it, because the way it works is that if you have a URL, when you have a URL slug already live and Google or whatever search engine, what we call crawls it and indexes it into their database, it stays like that forever. If you were to change, let's say, even one word in the URL slug, that tells Google or the particular search engine that it's a completely new page.
Oh.
So if people have the old slug, once they try to access it, they'll get an error. They'll get a 404 page because the slug changed for the original page, but in the index or database of that particular search engine, it still remains there, but it's not accessible because you already changed it.
You changed it.
But to answer your question, the way you implement the URL slug is through your backend host program, if you will. I think. Well, I wouldn't call it host. I would just say your backend program. In my case, I use WordPress, right?
Or,
So anytime you are about to publish a page, you have in your either the editor box or the toolbox. I'm blanking out. But you have a space that says URL slug, and you can change that to whatever you want it to be.
oh,
Or there's also other areas where, if you don't set something up, the program itself will pick up and try to understand what the content is about, and it'll implement its own URL slug, which I don't recommend you do, because if you're trying to optimize it, then you might not get your main keyword in there, you might not get the context of the URL slug, and it can just get things messy.
awesome. So no, again, thank you again. It was a great presentation. Like I said, I put it in the messages, and I believe you mentioned it earlier that everybody who joined us will get a copy of the PDF. The video, when it's ready, will be in our archive that's available to our small business members. So if you'd like to learn more about that, just go visit our website. Feel free to reach out to me. Be on the lookout for more presentations. Like I mentioned, we're going to be doing the same one tomorrow in Spanish. So if you know anybody who would prefer to hear this content in Spanish, let them know. We'll send the link out again. And besides that, I think, do you have any last words before we go ahead and close this out?
Yeah, just basically, if you like this presentation, like Joel mentioned, feel free to reach out, or if you want to hear it in Spanish, be sure to tune in tomorrow, same time, noon Eastern time, and also keep in touch, right? If you want to reach out to me, send me a DM, or just want to chat about SEO, you can follow me on Twitter, or you can connect with me on LinkedIn, or you can just email me at gmerced94@gmail.com. But that's basically it. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And again, thank you for the NPR Chamber of Commerce for the opportunity. And I look forward to the Spanish version tomorrow.
Yeah. And yeah, one more thing before we go ahead and close it out is that we were both talking before we started this, is that we do plan on doing various SEO topics. We'll go into some deeper dives. Maybe we'll even bring back some of the more fundamental stuff, some of the basic stuff that, because I think the first one you did, it was going on probably a little over a year. So I think we could have a new audience that might be interested in that content as well. So just stay tuned to the NPR Chamber, and follow us all on social media and stuff like that, so you can stay up to date on all that. But besides that, again, thank you everybody for joining us, and have a wonderful day.
Have a wonderful day, guys. Thank you.